Hi, welcome to Pro Shop Talk. I'm Daniel. I'm the technical director at RW Supply & Design. And today we're going to be looking at the topic of flooring sealers. We get to have the pleasure of interviewing RJ with PALLMANN. He's the technical director at PALLMANN, but he's also been a contractor for a lot of years. So welcome, RJ.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Sealers. There's a lot of confusion around sealers. I get a lot of questions about sealers. Why should contractors use a sealer? What is a sealer? The term sealer is almost a universal term, like, hey, don't finishes seal a floor, don't stains seal a floor. So hopefully today we can shed a little bit of light on what is a quote unquote sealer, why should it be used, and things like that. So based on your experience, both as a contractor and now with PALLMANN, really quickly, what would you say is a sealer and how does that differ from a finish or a stain?
So when I switched from oil modified into the water-based world and I went to PALLMANN, sealers were always talked about right away. And the main reasoning is that it's a larger molecule that allows the finish to sit higher. From the contracting perspective, I bought into it right away because it was physically cheaper than 3 coats of finish. So that was my kind of initial, well, they told me to use it and it's cheaper, so I'm going to use it in my 3-coat system.
Gotcha. So sealer's a bigger molecule. So what does that mean practically in terms of how it's going to sit on or penetrate the floor?
So basically, it doesn't saturate as deeply. At the same coverage rate, it physically won't soak into the grain of the wood as far as a finish will.
Gotcha.
And that allows a more even surface then for the finish to sit on top of and do what it's designed to do.
Gotcha. As I'm hearing you say that, when we think about a film forming finish like a urethane, that's providing protection to a floor by sitting above the wood and creating essentially a coat of plastic over the wood that protects the wood. So when you talk about a sealer being a bigger molecule that sits on top, what I'm thinking of in my head is there's now more build on top of the wood. It's that finish is sitting up above the wood and providing more protection above the wood.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha. What other reasons in terms of, well, I guess before I ask that question, where does sealer as a separate product sit within the coating system? Is it above, below the finish coats?
So for ours, it's going to be the first of the PALLMANN products to go on the floor.
Okay.
So if the floor is stained with a competitive product, we're going to run one of our sealers, 2 coats of our finish above that. If we're going onto raw wood, it's going to be the first layer and then 2 coats of finish on top of it on raw wood. So it's always the base layer.
Gotcha. Okay. So your sealers are the base coat between either the raw wood or the stain and the finish that goes on top. How many coats of finish plus sealer, just how many coats in general do you recommend for your PALLMANN finishes?
So our system is going to be a minimum of 3 and up to 4, depending on the product combinations used.
Okay, so you're going to be sealer, finish, or sealer, 3 coats of finish?
High commercial situations, sealer and 3 coats of finish. There is a minor performance benefit at the 3rd coat of actual finish. And then with 2 of the pigmented sealers, there's a lot of situations where we're going to recommend 2 coats of the sealer and then 2 coats of finish on top of that.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. And then, maybe the majority of residential situations, you're going to have sealer, finish.
Yes. Yeah.
So 3-coat system.
95% of the time, it's just 2 coats of finish.
Yeah. And so you would never recommend a 2-coat system with PALLMANN?
We don't have any way to do a 2-coat system at this point.
Gotcha. Okay. So sealer's that first coat, and like you said, it's dramatically going to help with build as one thing, but what other potential problems do you avoid with sealers, and what other benefits do you get with sealers as opposed to only using finish?
So the primary one is, again, being a larger molecule. Our sealers are physically softer than our finish, and the wood is constantly moving at a microscopic level. It's always moving, and it provides a shock absorber so we can allow the finish to be slightly more rigid or harder. which then leads to scuff and scratch and chemical penetration resistance. So it's a little shock absorber in the system. That's a primary advantage. It has very good shear quality, so if boards are pulling apart, it will allow the system to then break without discoloring before it breaks. And it will help with tannin pull. It has the whole line has very good tannin dissolvers in it, so it helps a lot with that. And then the final one, I think kind of one of the more important ones, is we've always mixed oil and water together. When you put down a stain, an oil solvent-based stain, we're putting water on top of it. You know, in certain ways, we've gotten away with a little bit of a magic trick there for a long time. The sealers are more tolerant of those solvents. So if the stain is not legitimately 100% dry, which there's not a way to tell if it is more tolerant of the outgassing from the stains. So to create a solvent-based white line, it helps minimize the risk of that as well.
Okay. Yeah, so I hear quite a few things in there. One is, shock absorbers helps with the wear of the finish. You can have a harder finish on top of the sealer because it's shock absorbing. Then white lining, which is when those boards pull apart, instead of a stretching of the finish, which is it makes the finish cloudy and white line, you get a breakage. And then on the application side, you get less burn marks from tannin pull and things like that.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. I think a lot of contractors think as well with stain, like, aren't stains sealers? Like, don't stains act as sealers? So what would you tell a guy who's putting down a stain and thinks that's a sealer and they don't need a sealer before the finish?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been common verbiage in the industry for a long time. Stain the floor with this and that's our sealer. What proved it for me personally was a practical test of staining half of a board and staining and sealing half of a board, or just putting a sealer on half of a board and then setting water on top of both of those and letting them go to evaporation and then feeling the grain raise that occurred. And on just a stained floor, you're going to get more grain raise, which fundamentally means it did not seal the floor as well. The stains, when you look on them, they're penetrating stains and we need finish to sit on top. So do they seal the floor to a degree? Sure, technically everything in this system is going to seal the surface to a degree, but the sealers do a much better job of physically holding stuff from getting down into the grain.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Are there instances where you would not use a sealer?
So the only instance that I've ever recommended, or that PALLMANN has ever recommended not using a sealer, we've had a couple of bamboo floors refinished, whether we resanded them, and because the surface is so incredibly non-porous, you don't want that extra build. You don't need that extra softness there, because it just led to a little bit of texturing in the finish, because as the finish gets too far away from the wood surface, all finishes are going to develop a slight amount of texture to them that it's naturally the way they happen. So that's the only situation PALLMANN's ever recommended not using a sealer, is on a really heavily compressed bamboo floor.
Gotcha.
And then you just run 3 coats of finish again, because then you can just stay closer to the surface.
Okay. Run me through PALLMANN sealers, because you have a few different sealers within your line. So run me through what your sealers are and then kind of why I would use one over and above the other. So
we have 4 waterborne sealers in the line. We have a product called Clear, which is designed for when you want a light appearance on wood or for over any pastel stains. It doesn't add any, it adds an extremely minimal amount of coloring to the floor. It's called Clear. We have a product called Color if you want more of a depth, more of a natural oil modified urethane appearance. So it's more of a wood tone enhancement product. And then we have 2 white pigmented water-based products in the line, one called NaturalSeal and one called WhiteSeal. NaturalSeal is for just if you want a raw unsanded appearance, that's where you would use the NaturalSeal to a slightly white floor, depending on if you did 1 or 2 coats. And WhiteSeal is if you really want to go for that heavy Scandinavian whitewashed appearance without getting into a white stain. Both of those could also go over a white stain if you wanted to make a floor even whiter.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's the 4 water-based sealers in the line.
Okay. And then you also have a new product that's a different type of sealer.
We have a new, totally different type of sealer called To Color It, which technically we're calling it a stain sealer. I prefer the term sealer stain. It's our best sealer in our line. It does happen to have a bunch of colors that contractors are going to recognize from the stain world.
Gotcha. Okay. So you also have limitations on your clear, right, in terms of species limitations?
Yep. So clear, we've run into a couple of scenarios where we would prefer. We've had situations where it worked, but we would say stay away from it. American cherry and American walnut, and then Daniel, you just brought up one, a fumed floor, which I was not familiar with clear having an issue on, but there can be an acidic reaction where the pore lines won't go away on those. Apparently, those three species: American walnut, American cherry, and the fumed floor, which you let me know about today. So.
And we might highlight the fumed floor was a floor that I coated with clear. I got burn marks in, so we're a little unclear whether it was user error in application versus the actual product, but
color is our more universal sealer.
Gotcha. So if you have questions about compatibility, color is going
to be the go-to recommendation across the board, and it comes up because a lot of homeowners want to lighten the coloring of an American cherry or a walnut floor. And I think industry-wide it's pretty challenging to do to lighten the physical color of those. So because clear is lighter in color, but the risk is too high. I would just go to color at that point.
Gotcha. And your pigmented white sealers, I know there are several pigmented white sealers that are hard to apply because you're almost like tint coating a floor where you have to have very even application. So what would you recommend to somebody who's coating with those?
So one of PALLMANN's main claims to fame has been it's easy. It's an easy product line to use. Our NaturalSeal and our WhiteSeal, they are pigmented. This is time to be on your A game application wise. The big factor with them is that they have a lot of open time. So you have time to work through them and do it, but it is not, you can't just physically flood the floor with them and walk away. You do have to think about pinning them down, getting them on evenly, giving them enough dry time to form the layer that they need to. So they are the easiest products to work with in the pigmented category.
Gotcha.
Which pigmented is, again, we need you on your A game to coat any pigmented product. They are more challenging just by design.
Gotcha. How would you recommend somebody apply your sealers? I mean, can you T-bar, pad, roll? Probably not lamb's wool, but like what application methods would you clear for a guy to
So
use?
clear and color, open book. Any way you want to get them on the floor, we're completely fine with. I know two people who still brush those on with a 6-inch wide brush.
Yeah.
But don't know why they do that. Maybe they hate themselves, but they still bend over and do it with a brush. That's how they learned how to do it, so that's how they do it.
Yeah.
NaturalSeal and WhiteSeal, I do have a few people who are very, very good with T-bars and have done it. It is easier to apply with a roller. Those two products are definitely easier to apply with a shorter napped roller to control the amount of product that you have in any given spot on the floor and be able to push it around. Yeah. So for the pigmented ones, a little more challenging with a T-bar, but I do have some guys that do it. But we would recommend a roller for those. I personally would recommend a roller for everything because I can't T-bar anything. I've been doing this for 32 years and it's embarrassing how bad I am with a T-bar. So I tell people roll it because if I can do it, you can do it. Yeah. So
you and me both. So, and with the rolling, especially with the pigmented, would you recommend somebody roll out of a bucket or pour on the floor?
In that case, both of those products are a slightly thicker.
Yeah.
And so those are the two I would definitely prefer out of a bucket or out of a paint tray. And again, you can also control the exact amount you have on your roller at any given time. So it does make it easier not to have a heavier spot where you have to really pull stuff out of your way.
Right.
Where with clear and color, if you have a heavy area and a lighter, it won't cause an effect. Those will be fine. But this I do prefer out of a paint tray, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Is there any instance where you would put a sealer over a finish? So
in our spectrum, there's not any way to put a sealer on top of a finish.
No real reason.
Yeah, there's no real reason or no practical reason, and it would only, again, it's totally different adhesion spectrum. So yeah, for PALLMANN, there would be no place for it as an intermediate or top coat.
Gotcha. At what point would you buff within your, let's say, a 3-coat finish system, would you apply the sealer and buff and then start applying finish, or would you apply the sealer, coat, and then buff and final coat, or what would you recommend?
So clear and color, no reason to ever buff them. Yep. They both can be abraded, but there's no reason to. They're open-ended in time frame, so if it sits over the weekend, the finish will still penetrate and stick to it, no problem. So that would be clear and color, first coat of finish, allow that to dry, abrade, and final coat. That would be the system. With NaturalSeal and WhiteSeal, they do have a 24-hour back-end window where they would have to be abraded with a 220, because again, they're pigments, so you can't abrade them real aggressively, but you do have to provide a little bit of an edge to those if it goes past 24 hours. So I prefer to get those down, come back within that 24-hour period, put the first coat of finish down, allow that to dry, and then abrade and coat. So we don't prefer that any of the sealers are abraded, but the NaturalSeal and WhiteSeal, if they does sit over a weekend, then to guarantee adhesion, yeah, we do need it to be abraded.
Okay, yeah, good to know. My favorite question. Guys are going to find creative ways to mess all products up. Lord knows I've found creative ways to mess products up. What are the easiest pitfalls that contractors can avoid when using a sealer or one of your sealers?
So with clear and color, they are hard to mess up. To be honest with you, the main problem that we see is not controlling the temperature of the surface they're going on. Because any waterborne material, they're going to react completely different. If you have a giant window with sun shining in and a cooler room, the water is going to evaporate faster on the hot floor. That's the main issue. As long as you get them wet and you get them coated, those two are very, very tolerant. They're very easy to apply. Stay away from clear on American cherry and walnut, because that can cause you an issue. NaturalSeal and WhiteSeal, the biggest pitfall that we see is just application lines where you roll the finish out, you roll the sealer out, looks pretty good, put the finish on top of it, and you get a little bit of, then all of a sudden you can start to see some of the application marks from the NaturalSeal or WhiteSeal. So making sure that those are coated properly, that's the biggest pitfall. Other than that, like I say, the clear and color are very easy to use. The main issue we see with those is the American cherry and the walnut or extremely hot surface.
Okay.
So
awesome. And I guess I didn't ask this, but I would assume all of your water-based finishes can go on all of your water-based sealers.
Yeah, it's a completely compatible line.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, RJ, thanks for being here. Thanks for clearing up sealer questions.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for the
questions.
RW. Thanks for the effort and getting some information out to the contractors. It's a challenge for us, so we appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the time.
Yep.